and we can get started. So as I mentioned, today's presentation is about effective aftercare planning services for adolescents and young adults who really want to be setting up young people for success. With us today are myself, Amanda Fialk. I am a partner and chief clinical officer at the dorm, and it's so nice to be here today. And along with me, presenting on this topic are Cindy Feinberg and Evan Flamenbaum. Cindy is CPC and an interventionist and the president of the Recovery Coach in New York. Cindy founded the Recovering Coach in 2010, which is built on a program she developed based on the philosophical theory of holism. The system as a whole determines in an important way how the parts behave. With a team of over 35 coaches nationwide, Cindy facilitates the actions necessary to aid individuals in remaining free from the chaos and disruption that drugs, alcohol, and other self-harming actions or addictions can create. We're so excited to have Cindy today. And also with us is Evan Flamenbaum, MA, DSW, and head of school at Academics West. Evan and I also went to the same college. Interesting. Dr. Flamenbaum is an advocate for children, adolescents, and young adults who experience mental health and academic issues. As the current head of school at Academics West and co-founder of Therapy West, Dr. Flamenbaum continues to integrate his clinical knowledge and background in education to train and guide professionals and parents. He is a nationally recognized lecturer and considered an expert on the treatment of learning issues in ADHD. Dr. Flamenbaum is also co-created Clinically Informed Academic, CIA, a research-based model that provides a framework to improve the overall functioning of students socially, emotionally, and educationally. Our agenda for today is as follows. We're going to do things a little bit differently. We're not going to have a ton of slides, but what we're going to do is we're going to look at 3 different sort of launching questions or discussion questions that we're going to be conversationally talking about and inviting you also to talk about or ask questions about in the chat. Elizabeth, can you just fast forward to the next slide? The 3 questions that we're going to be looking at are first, how do we define effective and ethical aftercare services for adolescents and young adults? Second, how do families, therapists, education consultants, how do you find a care team that meets the unique needs of each client? And then lastly, what are the benefits and limitations of the community integration model? And then finally, we'll leave space for Q&A. So to start, the first launching question that we're going to look at is, what defines, and it does have an and here, and I think both parts are really important, effective and ethical aftercare treatment for adolescents and young adults? Whoever wants to start, Cindy or Evan?
Go.
I'll go. Cindy. I'll draft off of you.
Sure. So ethical and effective are 2 things that are incredibly important when we're looking at aftercare treatment. And since in my company, we do case management and provide coaching and companions, effective is going to be what supports best the client's needs. And we work with the framework that we work within is working with the entire team. So whether that's working with the dorm, Academics West, a psychiatrist, various different therapists, what is going to support this person, whether it's an adolescent or a young adult best, is how we tackle each different client's needs. So that would be what would be most effective. And ethical, well, ethical could be anything from who is going to provide the best treatment, meaning like, is it a therapist that does what they say they do, meaning that if they say they're specialized in eating disorders, they have the proper credentialing for that. And when we are on the team as a coaching company, if I see a client struggling and needing a higher level of care, am I willing to, and do I then tell the rest of the team, I feel that this client needs a higher level of care? So that to me is providing ethical aftercare treatment.
You know, harp a little bit about the effective part from a, I'll take like a behavioral point of view, because why it's important to do what Cindy is saying. So what is the end game of aftercare? Is the generalization of skills, meaning to stabilize, to internalize skills, but at the end, skills have to generalize, meaning you need to be able to take them and use them in other spaces and places. So effective means what are we working and how are we going to take those specific things and work on them at home. If you're shooting at the wrong target, it's not effective. So effective means we know what we're trying to do, and we're just trying to find a way to take the skills and work it at home. There's always a lot of assumption that no, we're done at that point. No, we've worked on those issues. In my analogy has always been like, when I first got his driver's license, I'm like, he's like, look, Dad, I got my license. I'm like, yeah, I got my license. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Now you need to learn how to drive. And so I think is like, how are we going to provide driver's ed? Do you need it every day? Do you need the special car with 2 brakes? And of course, like Cindy said, it's a very involved thing. It takes a really united front to be able to translate that stuff.
Yeah, to piggyback on both of your points, in order for aftercare to be effective, aftercare has to happen, right? And I think what I see a lot of, sadly, is that a lot of young people will go to primary treatment and residential treatment or wilderness treatment. And, it's hard work. I feel for young people, they're doing a ton of work. It's very emotionally taxing for the whole family system. And then when they're done, they say to their parents, I'm done. I don't need aftercare. You made me do this. I did it. I spent, 6 months in residential. I spent 9 months in residential. I'm done. I'm not doing anymore. And they convince their family that, they don't need aftercare when they leave. And skills cannot be generalized in the community, in the natural environment, if they're not practiced, if they're not retaught, repracticed, remastered outside of a residential treatment facility. And I can't stress enough to families, to parents, no matter how much pushback there is, don't skip out on that part of the process. Aftercare shouldn't be an afterthought. Aftercare perhaps is the most integral part of the process, because it allows for the solidification and the true mastery of the skills that are being learned. And when you skip that part, what ends up happening is you see that revolving door where they end up just right back in residential. So for aftercare to be effective, aftercare actually has to happen. And aftercare should be considered right at the beginning of primary treatment. Like from week 1, like everybody should be thinking, okay, well, what's going to happen from an aftercare perspective? And it needs to be agreed upon before the person leaves. It's not, oh no, they go home and then, over the next week or 2, we'll figure out what aftercare is going to look at. No, before you leave treatment, aftercare plan is solidified, and there's no lapse. There's no, I'm going to end wilderness program, then I'm going to go away with my family for 4 weeks to Europe, and then I'm going to start aftercare. No.
I don't think we should call it aftercare, by the way. I think it's while I say this, ready? Because aftercare assumes it's just like we just do this after. It should be the care plan. Start day 1 in residential, which is what is the arc of generalization we're planning. What we do is a post thought. It should start day 1. And I think it's a misnomer. I think it almost makes it sound like something you can skip. Oh yeah, I'm okay. I don't need to do physical therapy. My ankle doesn't hurt. It's not. I think it should just be the care plan. And I find that's why you need somebody in the care process, like an ed consultant or somebody. There needs to be somebody like who's a constant there to make sure that plan is sort of thought about as it materializes, not thought that comes to fruition at the end of the plan journey, if that makes sense.
Mhm. So, and I don't know if you've seen this, Amanda and Evan, but very often when I'm referring a client to a higher level of care, I have them sign a contract before they go into treatment, saying that they agree to what we can also call a continuous care, agreeing to continuous care post-treatment, so that they already know upfront before they even go in that this is what life's going to look like for whatever that is, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days post-treatment. I'm going to work with this one. I'm going to work with this one. I'm going to get monitored. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z in order to be able to live at home or whatever the contingencies are.
I love that. I mean, and that's why, that's why we love working with individuals like yourself, because then when clients are coming to us for aftercare, it's not this, they might not be happy about it. I mean, let's face it, we work with young people. Most of them are walking in the door happy to be in aftercare. They're not, but it was a very explicit expectation. So they're not shocked by it. They're prepared for it. It's been planned for, and that makes the process significantly easier.
Mhm.
Amanda, what I hear a lot from folks on the residential side along those lines is they tend to find they get better sort of aftercare outcome when the discussion of that phase happens really early, because then, first of all, what seems to happen in my experience is the young adult or adolescent, as they do the contracting with the parents, like all of a sudden we're on very different pages. There needs to be enough time to maybe go back and do some family work, individual work. It takes multiple iterations to get there, because it's such a concept. Now you're leaving. Now you need to go back home. Everybody's expectations tend to be very not in line. It takes a long time to even get through that to a point that it's stable in place.
Yes, and also being very explicit about, like, I don't know, the level, the intensity, what the aftercare plan looks like, because alternatively, what we will also see a lot of is, okay, I'll do aftercare, but I'm just going to go to therapy once a week.
Mhm.
And you can drug test me. Which is for most people, when we talk about ethical and effective aftercare, I mean, it's not ethical to not give somebody the care that they need. It would be like somebody going into a hospital because they have cancer and they require chemotherapy, 5 days a week, and the doctor saying, I'm just going to do it once a week. Like, that's not ethical. You can't treat somebody like that. So it has to be the intensity level that's needed, and also the parts, the different types of interventions. I think it's when we look at Academics West, when we look at what you do, Cindy, when we look at what the dorm does, we all offer a unique type of intervention, a unique type of service. And oftentimes families or clients want to focus on one and exclude the other. And that's not a comprehensive, effective, ethical aftercare plan. Like, you can't only focus on academics, you can't only focus on community integration, you can't only focus on, one-on-one coaching support. It's a holistic approach.
That's such a good point. I actually thought of Academics West because I worked in the private. And Amanda remembers me in this phase of my life working in the private schools, and I would see kids come back and they saw their therapist twice a week instead of once a week. And think about it, they're in a closed system for an extended period of time, 24/7 sort of therapeutic support, and asking them to pull that away and just spend like 90 minutes a week with somebody in their office. I agree, that is not ethical, and I saw it go wrong. It's also a setup, which is the message to the young people I used to work with was like, well, now I'm good and I shouldn't have those problems. And parents like, yeah, we don't expect those problems, you shouldn't have them. And it's so interesting because they haven't had the chance to rehearse the skills in their home environment. I mean, that was the norm. It was also when I was in college with substance use. You went to treatment, you came back, treatment, you came back. That was the guy in the fraternity house drinking a lot of coffee. The expectation, you're done. You actually are just starting when you come home.
I just want to say one more thing about effective, because I think this is really important when we're working with young adults over 18, is that they agree to sign consents. Because very often I work within the framework of a large team. I mean, I could have like 7 or 8 people on a treatment team at a time. And if they're not willing to sign consents for me to speak with their clinical team, psychiatrist, even parents on a limited basis at best, it's not going to go really well, because anybody that's on this call that's clinical knows that there's a lot of splitting that goes on. And, very often my coaches are in their apartment, they get pretty close, they know a lot of what's going on. We have a lot of information to tell their team. And what we really need to do is to be able to talk very openly and very transparently in order to be able to help the individual the most.
Yeah, Cindy, could not agree with you more, to the point that we actually will not, unless there's a really compelling clinical reason to not do so, like there's some type of an abuse situation or trauma, we will not treat a young adult over the age of 18. And they tell us they're over 18, and we understand they're over 18. And we don't feel like we can provide effective ethical treatment unless we have consents to speak with all of your treatment providers and your family members.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Period. So, I think that this provides a nice little segue into question 2, because it's one thing to sort of define what effective and ethical aftercare looks like, but how do you pick the team? What is the appropriate or the right clinical team for your specific child, or for yourself if you are the young adult or adolescent that's seeking treatment? There's so much out there to choose from. Where do you start? How do you do it? I think this is a question that overwhelms a lot of families and individuals seeking treatment.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to do, talking to parents for like the last 25 years, is nobody gives you a piece of paper and it's like, here's your team. And I think what's hard in the mental health world is, hey, if your foot hurts, you go to a foot doctor. If you're having some sort of social emotion, what is DBT? I mean, I see all these kids going, oh yeah, I'm seeing a psychoanalyst. Oh yeah, I'm seeing a psychoanalyst, and I'm self-injury. I'm like, 5 years, you're going to gain some, insight's nice, change is better is always our motto. So we end up doing a lot of psychoeducation with our families about even what the elements of an aftercare, what kind of stuff you're for and what it means. Because like, oh, I just want to go back. He likes his old therapist. We're going to go with that. And I think good evidence-based care means what works, and who's the person in front of you? Does it work for them?
Mm-hmm.
So much is imposed on our clients that you have to have a sense of like what's available and what's going to work for them, and is it the and what's going to work for them, and is it the right intervention? And obviously many programs create aftercare plans or family plans. They have to be bridge folks like us. We have to spend a lot of time before that knitting that together. We make stipulations, which is like part of our acceptance letter is, and by the way, you need to be at the dorm, or you need to have an in vivo coach, or you need to be in a DBT program. I think the other part of it is, which I was going to say, just like as you segued us here, is compliance. How you can set all this stuff up, they have to do it. And so one of the things harder, I think, for some of, well, I mean, it could be like, you can't be in our program, or I won't work with you. is that you will be asked to leave if our clinicians find out that you have absolutely disengaged from everything that you agreed to do to come here. And that's, I think schools have that leverage. I find there needs to be somebody in the care system that has that kind of leverage.
Mhm, mhm. So I'm gonna piggyback a little bit on what Evan just said, but I'm gonna just speak to, sometimes I do get clients who come to me who do have a piece of paper from a treatment center with a bunch of names on them. And I look at the names and I cringe sometimes, because I do know a lot of people in the field, and some of them are not ethical, but they're friends of some of the people. And so that's where we go back to what's ethical. And, being in this field for some time and being in the New York area for some time, I do know a lot of the good people. And so I think for families, it would be getting a recommendation from somebody you trust, whether it be an ed consultant, a case manager, somebody that has experience, or a child that you're friends with the parent, and then saying, so I need to hire, a few people, or I need to send them to a private school. I need to send them to a place like the dorm. Where do I start? Because like I said earlier, there are a lot of clinicians out there who say they specialize in every specialty. And like we know, we all can't specialize in everything. We all have to stay in our lane, and it's hard and it can become overwhelming. And I think the best place to start is to start with somebody you trust, and then to build from there.
We had a question come in from the chat, and I think it's a really valid and fair question, which is, the individual said, I understand what effective aftercare should look like. But as a parent, it feels like it is impossible to put it together and to find it without hiring a private EC. Like, how do you as a parent navigate this? Like how, and what you're saying, Cindy, makes sense. Like, find one person that you trust and then build from there. I'm sure even that feels very overwhelming, because when you think about it, for a young person, there's the mental health services that they need, right? Maybe that's addiction, maybe that's an eating disorder, maybe that's both, maybe that's a mental health diagnosis, or all of the above. That typically requires individual therapy, probably some coaching, group therapy. Definitely, if they're a young person, you need that sort of community approach. Psychiatry, maybe psych testing, if you haven't had updated psych testing. That's just the mental health side. Then if they're a young person, you also need to be looking at the academic side, right?
Sure.
You also need to be looking at social. You also need to be looking at family. And I think also should be looking at more of the holistic approaches, health and wellness, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, exercise, diet and nutrition. That's a lot. That's a lot.
And I'll be just transparent. I used to sort of poo-poo the outcome. Like, why do we need a middleman? But sometimes it was one of your old colleagues where you used to work, I'm not going to say who, where, would say to parents, like, I don't want to pay for another consultant. And they say, well, if you want to save money, this is the way to go, because you're going to waste so much more money mulling around. It has to start from a place of trust. I don't know about you guys, but first of all, I totally agree with Cindy in the sense that over my years of doing this, some of the quote best people are just marquee names. They're probably the best marketers. They're not necessarily the best people. And it's also like, who's the best? There's no good school. There's like the good school for you. And I think fit is important. And one of the a little anxious about is when we ever give a referral, I will never give one name. I'll give 3. You want a psychiatrist, 3 people. And I think that's part of ethical practice, but I also think it sends the signal to parents. We've even had to think we get kickbacks. There's such a lack of confidence. There's such a lack of confidence I think we have to do everything we can to be honest without throwing people too hard under the bus, but I will if I feel it's going to hurt a kid. And we have to behave in a way that gets them to trust us. Because sometimes I have to bite my tongue. I know Cindy does all the time. But we have to do what's right for the clients. That's it.
I think on the positive side, what we're seeing more and more of is programs understanding that sort of rising to the occasion and stepping up and getting more creative in the programming that they're offering and providing a more holistic approach to treatment so that more components of what's needed can be done under one roof. Because what you also don't want is a young person like running from place to place to place to place to place, you know, every afternoon. So just anecdotally to the person who asked that question, I do feel that more and more we are seeing both in primary and aftercare settings, places where you can get 3 and 4 needs met under one roof, which is helpful and makes the process more effective and more efficient as well. Anything else you all want to add on this, finding and picking out your?
Oh, I was going to say, one of the things that I see kind of like makes it difficult is places will recommend names. And then all of us say, well, hey, here's who we work with, A lot of it is about who we work with best. Because it's going to be like, I know people who work well with each other and work well with you. And there's no way, I mean, it's not a slight, it's the program to know who to sort of put forth as potential candidates for your list.
Yeah.
Like what works for us too is important.
The other thing I would add too is that it's so important, this idea of choice also needs to be extended to the young person. They don't have a choice as to whether or not they are doing aftercare. That's a non-negotiable in my opinion. If they want to, you know, come home, etc. Aftercare is not negotiable. Where they do it can be. So here's a program in New York. Here's a program in California. Here's a program, an aftercare program in Utah. Like, here are these 3 programs. You, child or young adults, are going to get on the phone with each of them. And you tell me where you want to go. You have to pick one of those 3, but I think giving them a choice is really, really, really important in the process.
I agree with you, Amanda. I give clients a choice of their coach too. I will give them the profile, you know, find out what their passions are, not just what the need is based on mental health or substance misuse, but really dig into what their passions are and then match them with an appropriate coach.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next question, the final question. What are, and I love this question because I'm obviously a bit biased on this one, but what are the benefits and limitations of community integration treatments?
You know, Amanda, I think the converse of that, maybe to start, when is it necessary to go residential?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and I think obviously simple answer is when there's risk, whether, you know, substance use or suicidal idea, or even risk of flight, or you need to do some significant, you know, medication adjustment. Because I mean, I really want to make sure people go residential. It's for the right reason, because they can, I mean, it's a stabilization opportunity. And one thing I want to comment about as like coming back, it's I don't know if it's a limitation or a benefit, but it should be an expectation. And I think it's important to distinguish between relapse and regression. What most people who are on the residential side is, okay, we've come up with a great plan. We've actually worked on this team. We feel good about its efficacy and that it's ethical. Is kids will often start getting worse before they come home. It's like, I'm leaving, I'm anxious, the whole system starts getting regressed. And so we found it really, regression is expectable. let's not call relapse is a different thing, which is like, wow, you're back in a place, much more intervention, and you need stabilization again. Regression is a normal pattern of behavior. We all, when we were talking before we even started today, this first day of school, all kids regress a little bit. They might start doing some talking. The kindergarten kid starts talking baby talk, whatever. That's part of normal development. Part of this whole thing has to be able to educate families what is normal, and all the effective plans must have it built in. There's going to be some slipping and sliding. We need to build into the plan how we're going to handle regression, and yes, and what we would do if there's relapse. But confuse those things. Uh-oh, he's starting to fight again with me. This is over. No, let's build that into what we're expecting. I think that's been really helpful when somebody said that to me once.
Yeah, I love that you brought up that point, Evan. You know, when is residential treatment necessary and when is it not? And that can be as a primary source of treatment, as like the first course of treatment, and that can also be as like a when is it necessary when you're seeing some of like the regression versus relapsing behaviors. You know, I think it's important to note that for a long time, there was only really kind of a handful of choices that individuals had when young people were struggling in their home environment. It was either A, that they went away, or B, that they did outpatient programming. And there's a big difference in the level of care and the intensity of the services provided in residential treatment just versus like your standard IOP or OP, where you go to group 3 days a week and then have 1 or 2 individual sessions, then go home. And now we're seeing a lot of community integration programs, which offers the opportunity for young people to be able to receive extraordinarily intensive and comprehensive services while still living in their home or community environments, which gives us choices. And for some young people, like Evan said, when there's risk involved, when their safety or the safety of others is at stake, yeah, they might need to leave their community environment for a period of time, go to residential, then come back and do aftercare in the community. For other clients, they might not need that. And effective and ethical care, we always say, especially with young people, you want it to be as the least restrictive as possible, because while leaving home can be life-changing and life-saving for some, it has a big impact on the young person. And you want to do it when it's necessary. You don't want to do it when it's not necessary. So really thinking through, based on the diagnosis, what is clinically indicated here. And one of the benefits that I love, and I think one of the pros of community integration programs is that it allows young people to practice, to hone, and to generalize, as we were talking about in the beginning, skills in the environments that they're living life on life's terms, where they're living life on a day-to-day basis, which is an amazing opportunity for them. Because even if they go to residential treatment, they're still going to have to come home and learn how to do these skills in their school, in their social environments, on the athletic field, where in their volunteer positions, in their jobs, and community integration programs offer the opportunities for young people to do just that.
You know, Amanda, I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. And you know, I think you've probably heard me. One of my concerns with long-term residential, I just met a kid, high school junior or senior, who's residential for four years. Concern about that period of time, like what you said, coming with your family, sports team, school, how young people develop, how they socialize, is based on their interaction with their friends, their family, and all these things in their environment. I do find when kids are away too long, you run the risk of starting to change their developmental trajectory. they start like from alleviating from maybe more of the normal track or a more adaptive track. And if they're gone, it really changes their trajectory. And I also feel academics can succeed, whether it's residential or at home. And you know, my platform is that good education is a significant protective factor for young people. Like we always like, it should not be secondary. It's actually that thing that is predictive if you get a good education of having a more successful future. But I'm, you know, one of the benefits I find is getting you back to where you can develop in a much healthier way than just being safe is great, but not at the risk of a healthy developmental path.
I just want to add one thing to what you both just said that I agree with wholeheartedly, is that a big benefit of working within the community and the home environment is being able to work within the system. And, you know, it's really fascinating to watch a young adult, adolescent. We've worked with a lot of adolescents in their home for many months while they work with an entire team and outpatient program, and work with the families and the parents, and watch the entire system change and grow and get better, where they wouldn't have an opportunity to do that if they were in long-term residential. I mean, to what Evan just said, we work with a young man who was in residential for 3 or 4 years. He came home in Washington, D.C. He was a different gender when he came home. He actually worked with the dorm and my company in conjunction. And I think it's going on 2.5, 3 years. There's still incredible family dysfunction because he was away for so long. And trying to integrate him back into his entire family system is really difficult. So I do see so many benefits of keeping the family system intact when there's not the danger of a higher level of care needed. And then on the other hand, when there is risk involved, like we do have cases where the parents are split and one parent colludes with the child and allows the risky behavior and hides it from the other parent. And then we have to intervene on that. So, you know, there's both sides of the coin, and you have to know what's working and what's not working. So, I mean, I think about my own life, and I think about how wonderful it would have been to have like family system work in the home, and you know, what that might have looked like.
I love that you gave a case example, Cindy, because I really feel like it brings things to life. And while you were talking, I was actually thinking, even like the smallest examples that seem like not a huge deal, or like they're that clinically significant, actually really do make a big difference. Like, for instance, in the context of a community integration program, if you have a client who you're working with who really wants to get a job, but really struggles with, you know, social anxiety, or just general anxiety, or maybe struggles with executive function and motivation issues. You know, there's the work that you do in a therapy room with, you know, your 4 walls surrounding you, the different CBT work that you can do, the role plays. And there's so much planning that can be talked about and practiced within group settings. However, in a community integration program, in addition to all of that, you can actually go out onto the street with your client, walk down the street to the coffee shop that they are going to be applying for a job, and each step of the way, talk about what they're feeling. What's your anxiety level at between a 1 and a 10? Okay, let's stop. Let's take some deep breaths. Let's do some visualization. Okay, let's take 10 more steps. Let's get closer to the coffee shop. And it might take 20 times of walking closer and closer to the coffee shop, but eventually you're going to wait at the door. They're going to walk in. They're going to ask to speak to the manager. They're going to hand the manager their resume. They're going to go through the interview. And this is the work that gets done in vivo in real time that is so powerful.
I think that is like the most important thing. You just, what we see is, why the in vivo work is so important. So let's say you see your therapist on Thursday and you have your panic attack on Monday. Well, by the time you see them, you're like, boy, it would really been helpful if you had been there Monday. And so I think the in vivo part of aftercare planning, we emphasize so much, like Amanda said, treatment. I find most of the change, like I could be the greatest violin player teacher in the world and teach Cindy 1 hour, 2 hours a week. She has to go practice 20 hours a week. So the ability to rehearse skills in the moment, if that's not part of the aftercare plan, it's not going to work. Why would it? We're asking you to do something at a time when you can't do it. And so that's why when we work with kids, we always make, it's great if I can do it in school. I have to work with somebody else like you guys on the outside to make sure that it's generalizing, but it's proximity to when those events happen. Otherwise, I mean, treatment is limited. Office-based treatment is limited. We're going to give you your CBT homework. I hope you do it. Versus, hey, I'm there doing it with you so we can process it and use your tools. It's a big deal.
Anything else that you both wanted to add on this question before we open things up to general questions, comments? Okay, let's go to gallery view and then we can get some comments, some questions. I did see, I'm going to open up my chat box because I did see 1 or 2 questions come in. Okay, here's a question that came in. There's a common belief for some in the recovery world that staying in their home environment triggers them to relapse if they're struggling with substance use. Are there some cases where community integration could take the place of residential programs for substance use while avoiding the triggers?
Well, you could answer that, Amanda. I mean, the dorm is a good place for somebody.
I was going to give you the question first, Cindy, actually.
Okay. Well, I would recommend a client going to the dorm for a time and working with their team, because they offer all the clinical care that somebody would need in lieu of going away, and they would get the treatment that they need, they would get the support they need, they would get the community that they need. And then after that, or during that, they could work with one of my coaches if they needed more support. But we could start to work on an aftercare plan while they're there, of coming home, working with a coach, and finding out exactly what are the triggers, right? And if the triggers are the home environment, they could identify that with the clinical team at the dorm and really flesh out, is it appropriate to go back home?
Yeah, we have certain clients, substance using clients that we work with only young adults. So 9 times out of 10, we actually from a clinical perspective, whether there's a substance use issue or not, prefer to have our clients not living at home, but rather living in one of our apartments or our recovery house. Oftentimes less because of the substance use and more because if they're living at home, they're not learning skills to live on their own. Because if they're living at home, the pattern that has arisen is that parents have become their coach, their executive function, their alarm clock, the person who goes grocery shopping for them, the person who has meals, they're cooking meals for themselves. So the young person doesn't learn how to cook their own meal. The young person hasn't learned how to do their own laundry. I can't tell you how many young people that come to us that don't know how to do their own laundry. And it's for those reasons that we want them out of the home so that we can teach those skills so that when they go to college, they can experience success in college, or if they're post-college, that they can live independently in a manner that's healthy and fulfilling. For some, if they are using substances, they do, you know, living with us would help them to, you know, just there's more boundaries around curfews, et cetera. But we're not a lockdown facility, you know, we're just not. And yet for many, just having that structure and the boundaries is in place is enough. For others, they do need to go away to residential. It's a clinically nuanced issue. Like we said in the beginning, from an ethical perspective, we want to try the least restrictive, safe means to help them get the support that they need.
You know, I want to just make a general comment about, I think, what this question is predicated on, which is, I think we're so used to just seeing residential and aftercare as on a continuum, and I think there are times where they can both be and what I'm seeing, you know, Amanda said it before, intensive community-based support is now much more the norm than it was a while ago. And we get a lot of parents who are frustrated because they're told you either have to do, it's so binary, and they can both sit at the same table. And one of the things we talked about this before the as we were planning this event, one of the things you see that's interesting when you're looking at aftercare, or when you're looking at aftercare or which option, you also have to look at the system. Mom is like, no way are we sending the kid away, even though it's like, hell yeah. The kid is like, I'm going to run away. And so looking at the systems, one of the sometimes we walk this say, everybody's just assuming things. Let's be empiricists. Let's be diagnostic. And so you're going to go to the dorm, or you're going to work with Cindy for like 3 months. Let's see, because you know what? Maybe it does work. Great. It's like Amanda said, then it becomes the least restrictive environment. Or, you know what, it isn't working based on all these measures that we've sort of created benchmarks. Now the system is much more likely to line up on the same side of the fence. We tried it everybody's way. This is what the data said. This is what the data said. This is what the experiential sort of information says. To either go away, or we know it works. And I think that it's that kind of create has to take place as we look at the whole system. Because I think oftentimes the parents are only the ones imposing the decision on you. You have to look at the whole system.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that I always hear, and I cannot stress this enough, is that if my kid is using substances, how could they possibly stay in New York City? Like, how could they possibly stay in New York City? Or how could they possibly stay in Washington, D.C.? And for some, they do need to just get out of the city initially, just because it's too triggering of an environment. New York City, Washington, D.C., LA, these big cities happen to be some of the most powerful, amazing, wonderful places for young people to stay sober, because there is such an amazing young person's recovery network. Young people don't want to get sober to be miserable and bored and sitting at home on a Friday night and doing nothing. They need to meet other young, fun, exciting people who are also in recovery. And you find that in New York City, in DC, in LA, in these major cities. So it's a wonderful place for a young person to build an amazing recovery network. I see Michael's hand. I just want to give you a chance, Michael.
Hey, everybody. Yes, I was going to say, Amanda, is it better to type the question? I wasn't sure if we were able to kind of speak or if we should type it. That it's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. All right. This is, first off, thank you, all three of you. Thank you so much for this conversation. I have a million things to say. I was taking notes as you were speaking, actually, but obviously in the interest of time, I'll just kind of dive in. I mean, you know, Amanda, what you just brought up is so important. I mean, first off, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and an outreach specialist for Newport Academy. So, you know, we work a lot with adolescents, young adults, and just to your point, Amanda, so often when working with adolescents, I can't tell you how many times, obviously on a smaller scale, but parents are like, you know what, I need to get my child out of this school district because they're hanging around the wrong crowd. And I think the issue with that mentality, first off, it's this instant gratification versus delayed gratification type mentality. But I think the bigger issue is not getting to the root cause of what's going on. I think oftentimes, if that's the person's chosen way to cope or whatever it is, if you're not getting to the root cause, where there's a will, there's a way. They're going to find it in another district as well. Obviously that's specific to adolescents, but one of the things I wanted to bring up that I thought you touched on really well is how we reframe, like you said before, Dr. Flamenbaum, not exactly aftercare treatment, but really what life after a residential program looks like, or just the next step in your care looks like. And I think, one of the things that's so important is really kind of helping them understand that, we want them to be a part of the discussion. I think all three of you hit the nail on the head, kind of allowing them to be a part of that discussion, because I think so often this is a population that is kind of steered which way you're going to go. And so much of the control is taken away. So I think there's only so much buy-in in the process when you don't feel like you're a part of the decision.
Thanks so much for that.
So not so much a question, just more a comment. You guys hit the nail on the head. Thank you.
Thank you for contributing, and those are important comments as well. Thank you. I have one more question. I see. I'm just really mindful of time. I think it's important that everybody gets a break before their next 4 o'clock session. But I just one quick question that Evan, I think you'd be really great to tackle is somebody's asking home versus a supported college environment, if that even exists.
Home versus, okay.
Like a supported college environment or a therapeutic college environment that's not in the hometown.
Well, I mean, I can only say this about colleges now, unlike where Amanda and I went to college last week, freshman year of college. So I'm on a ledge. But what I'm amazed at is there is a lid for every pot. It is amazing the amount of incredible. I got an email today from Skidmore saying we now have a same-day mental health service. Any kid with a problem, we're going to see you that day. The amount of support in every college, and obviously some have much more, sober housing, executive functioning coaches, built-in therapy. They'll find you a psychiatrist in the environment. And like Amanda said, you think college, like, unfortunately, my experience with college, everybody was kind of going bananas, but forget an amazing built-in support group for whatever it is you need support with. So what we see a lot of when we're like worried that that's not enough, and usually my indicator is like, you just don't have the maturity or executive functioning to go yet. So we're going to keep you closer to home. So again, we have a kid, we do a transition program. We have a few students now, they're taking a couple of college classes, handle it. And then we will put in all the aftercare pieces. But colleges, there are even colleges, specific, really clinically sophisticated sobriety programs.
Thank you, Evan, for taking that one. And with that, and with 4 minutes left to take some deep breaths before the next session, now 3 minutes, I want to thank everybody so much for coming. Like we said, we will be sending out slides, the link to the YouTube video. Please feel free to contact any of us if you want to continue any of these conversations. We all love talking about all of these topics and would love to continue any conversations that you want to. So thank you for your time. We appreciate you and have a great afternoon.
Good luck, everybody, with the beginning of the school
Thank you.
year.